Hello and welcome back to Bits and Bobs. Today's video is all about the life and legacy of King Henry VII, the monarch of the month for January 2024. So let's begin. Now here we start with Henry VII's father, Edmund Tudor, 1st Earl of Richmond, and he was married to Henry VII's mother, of course, who is Margaret Beaufort, and here we can see her on screen. They had a child who would later become Henry VII, who was born on the 28th of January 1457. And he was born in and raised in Pembroke Castle in Pembrokeshire, Wales. As you can see here, a lovely castle. Now, he was brought up and raised by Jasper Tudor, as we can see here, a stained glass portrait of him. Jasper Tudor raised Henry VII in Pembrokeshire Castle for the first 14 years of his life. He lived there and was educated and raised in Pembroke Castle. Now, the young Prince Henry was a high member of the family of the House of Lancaster. And at this time, of course, the War of the Roses between the House of Lancaster and the House of York was raging. So Henry sought exile in France, and so Jasper Tudor and the young Henry, only 14 years old, fled to Brittany in France to seek exile from the War of the Roses in which he was wanted. They landed in Brittany where they sought the protection of Francis II, Duke of Brittany, which he did give to them. The Lancastrians, along with the Jasper and Henry, were housed at the Château de Soussincourt in Sarzeau, a lovely, lovely castle as we can see here in the country. So although he was in exile, he was still living like a future king in this French castle in Brittany. He spent the rest of his childhood here and many years after that, and here you can see a portrait from the time of a young, not king yet, but King Henry VII when he was younger, living in exile in Brittany in France. Now then, along comes the year 1485, and Henry VII had raised a small army to depose King Richard II, at the time was the King of England. He was from the House of York, of course, the enemies of the House of Lancaster. So Henry returned with an army and fought Richard III at the famous Battle of Bosworth Hill. Now, this is the last major battle of the War of the Roses, where King Richard III is defeated and killed by Henry Tudor, the Earl of Richmond. After the battle, the royal crown, which Richard was wearing during the battle, was picked out of a bush and placed upon King Henry's head, who, of course, as the Richard III was killed, instantly became King Henry. So the era of the Plantagenet kings is over. That was done by the House of York, and now the House of Lancaster had the throne, starting the era of the Tudors, one of, if not the, most famous royal houses. Now, a month later, on the 30th of October 1485, King Henry VII was officially crowned at Westminster Abbey, marking the true start of a whole new era of the monarchy. So now he is king. Let's go through the timeline of his reign and the key events happening under the reign of Henry VII. Starting with the marrying of him only a few months after he became king, on the 18th of January 1486. He married Elizabeth of York, a crucial part of the War of the Roses, as she was of York, he was of Lancaster. Now they were sort of unified, as the English rose contained the red and the white rose of the symbolising the York and Lancastrian families coming to peace. The year after, on the 20th of September 1486, his firstborn child was born, Arthur, Prince of Wales. As we can see there on screen, a picture of him in his teenage years. Then, in the autumn of 1489, King Henry VII ordered a new coinage of gold to be struck. The first ever gold sovereign was struck in 1489 and featured to the obverse a crowned, throned bust of King Henry VII, the largest gold coin struck to date and still made today. Then on the 28th of June in 1491, his second son was born, and this you may recognize him here, of course, was King Henry VIII, or was to be in the future King Henry VIII, of course, then was Prince Henry, born in 1491. Overall, during their lifetimes, Henry and Elizabeth had 9 children, as we can see on here, of course, most famous of being by far King Henry VIII, and Arthur, Prince of Wales, his eldest son, of course, dying, as we'll soon find out, before taking the throne. As we see here, he died on the 2nd of April in 1502, therefore leaving the heir to the throne as Prince Henry rather than him, and of course Henry VIII was very famously taking the throne after Henry VII, leading into the most infamous era of history for the British monarchy under King Henry VIII. The year after his eldest son died, his wife died. On the 15th of February 1503, Elizabeth of York dies, leaving the king a widower and of course very upset after his wife had passed. Now the main thing he sought to correct in the country was law and order, which was very much improved. The law and order systems were brought up to date, and crime decreased as justice increased for the people. Henry VII was the first person to use the Red Dragon of Cadwaladr as part of his coat of arms. The Red Dragon now features, of course, as we know, on the Welsh flag, still to this day. as a fun fact for you. Now, sadly, Henry VII did die on the 21st of April, 1509, fairly young by today's standards, aged only 52, although this wasn't too bad for the 15 and 1400s when he had lived. Henry VII was the last English king to win his crown in battle. Henry VII founded the Tudor dynasty and ended the famous War of the Roses. So a good king for the country, and all throughout his reign, King Henry VII ruled peacefully, and under him the country prospered economically and socially. He was a very popular king and greatly missed under his son's reign, of course, who of course was not remembered as such a good king as his father, but Henry VIII's reign, of course, who succeeded him the day he died, was one reportedly of tyranny and more scandalism than the sort of peaceful, honest, trusting and prosperous king that was Henry VII. So there we go. Please do comment down below any extra Henry VII facts, and of course thank you for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed. Bye for now from Bits and Bobs.